and the government have held recently in an effort to achieve a just and lasting response for all Australians to the High Court's Mabo judgment.
The Honourable the Prime Minister.
Speaker, I think most members of this House would accept that Mabo amounts to the most important change to Australian land law since Federation, and that it does give the country a great opportunity to right a wrong, to effect a basis of repossession of the country for and by Aboriginal people long dispossessed of land which they traditionally held. That's the core sense of Mabo. That's the core reason that the High Court, I think, overturned the concept of terra nullius, the land of no one, in righting the wrong, in repairing the fiction, that there wasn't native title and custom that should be a part and a core part, a contribution to our common law. Now that's what the High Court has decided. And well, if you're dispossessed, you'd say you're repossessing it, wouldn't you?
Order.
I would think that.
Member for Flinders, the Prime Minister does
Well,
not need your help.
I know you're the Shadow Minister for bashing
The member
blacks,
for Flinders.
and that's your role, that's right, I know.
The Prime Minister will withdraw.
Right. There's nothing but vociferous anti-Aboriginal interest coming from Mr. Speaker.
I ask you to withdraw them.
Mr. Speaker, if he objects to that, I'll withdraw it.
He has withdrawn.
Mr. Speaker,
He has withdrawn.
Mr. Speaker, we've got an opportunity now of being able to put together what I think is a landmark piece of legislation. And over the course of the last few months, we've continued a dialogue with the states and on and off with the Aboriginal community and various segments of the Aboriginal community. Now, last week there was a press report saying that the government's prepared to concede a number of points to the states in order to get a deal. Now, that was an erroneous report, and I made it clear the Commonwealth had already informed the states that any attempt to water down the principles of our proposed legislation would be rejected. Now, is that right? Yes. Now, Mr. Speaker, well,
Member for Flinders.
If the cap fits, wear it. Mr. Speaker, now, Mr. Speaker...
Order!
Mr. Speaker, now the states have come back to us on these issues. The Commonwealth has always seen, obviously, the very clear role the states play in land management in this country. We don't manage land. States manage land, by and large. We manage land in the ACT and in Commonwealth territories, but no further. But we also have a clear responsibility for Aboriginal, the advancement and welfare of Aboriginal people, given the Commonwealth Parliament by the nation at the referendum in 1967. So there are trade-offs here between the Commonwealth's prerogatives and responsibilities in Aboriginal policy and the questions of the state's role in land management. Now, we're now we've been talking to the states and we've been talking to the Aboriginal community. And it is possible, in a configuration of measures, to get a bill which actually serves all the principles of justice for Aboriginal people, an effective system of land management for the country, and one which the states can involve themselves in. One which, well, a little bit of statesmanship over there wouldn't help either, Tim. A little bit. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, they can never rise to the occasion, no matter what it is.
Member for O'Connor.
Mr. Speaker, so that I met Premier Kennett this morning, and I told him.
Order. Member for Fisher.
I told him that that what I thought the outstanding issues were. He has gone away to consider some of those issues, and as a consequence we'll talk again later in the day. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is, I think, a very clear opportunity here to actually set up a regime which Aboriginal people think is fair and just to their interests, where it is participatory on their part, where they have a right to be asked about the economic use of their land, where there is maintenance of native title, the protection of native title, so there's not mass extinguishments of native title after so much of it having already been extinguished, and in the processes of hearing and awarding native title, a proper assessment of the economic use of land, a proper process of evaluation, a tribunal process, and in the end, though, the ministers of the various states having the capacity to override a particular development in the event there was an interest of the state or the nation. Now, in all of those things, we think that a balance can be met, but it means the states will have to give some ground. It'll mean on some things the Aboriginal community will need to accept a role for the states in some areas. In all of these things, it should be possible, nevertheless, to develop a highly principled piece of legislation. Better than most things we do in this Parliament. In fact, something that will stand the test of time over a very long period of time. Now, the Cabinet is meeting on this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. We are reaching the point now where we're running up against the deadline of introduction of the bill to the Parliament. And if we don't have a couple of weeks to in fact clear up drafting instructions for parliamentary draftsmen, it won't be possible to have a bill introduced this side of Christmas. It's important, I think, that a bill is introduced this side of Christmas. This is not an issue that ought to be allowed to leach out, everyone tearing and ripping away at it over next year, and where we can consolidate these principles for the interests of everybody. So, Mr. Speaker, I just make the point that we'll remain with an open mind on states' interests, but the states have also got to understand that the Commonwealth has a clear responsibility to Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal community themselves have got to recognise some of the imperatives of the states in the economic system and land management of this country, and all those things together, I think, give us the capacity to pull together the threads of a very sophisticated and, in a technical sense, complicated bill, but complicated only for the reason that it needs to cover off so many interests so persuasively and sympathetically. Now, we stand, I think, very much on the threshold of doing something, some primary thing, in a good way, to deal with reconciliation between Australians, non-Aboriginal Australians and Aboriginal Australians, and the vehicles of the repossessing of land, and also social justice for those who cannot avail themselves of Mabo through other devices for the getting and acquisition of land, are all the things which I think are available here and at stake. So this is a critical time, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly hope that the parties in the chamber can understand the weight of the issues and the fact that ground may have to be given on points, and that's just as true for the states as it is true for the Aboriginal community, all the factions therein.
The Honourable Leader of the National Party.